into the deep woods. We're going to read chapter 13, but let's talk about chapter 12. That's where Twig saw the sky pirate ship falling from the sky, and then he ran to find it, and he saw these pirates, and then that bad guy Slivo Spleef came and told him to go look for the ship, and then Twig told him where the ship was, and then he told him where that rock was that makes it float. And then right when that bad guy was going to have him leave without the captain showed up. And then the captain had a Banderbear with him, and the Banderbear's a albino, and his name is Hubble. And then when he saw Twig, he said, "Friends." So he knew Twig's Banderbear, and then he hugged him, and so they're good friends. And then in the evening after dinner, the captain was talking about when he was not a captain and just a pirate, and then his wife was having a baby, and then the ship crashed or something, and then she had the baby, and he couldn't keep the baby and still be a pirate, so they gave the baby to wood trolls. And so now Twig knows who his dad is. There was stillness, then there was movement, then there was stillness again. The stillness was that point of deepest, darkest silence shortly before the dawn. Twig rolled over, pulling Spiker's blanket tightly around him. His dreams were full of sky ships sailing across the indigo depths. Twig was standing at the helm. He raised his collar against the wind. "Gallantly sailing," he murmured, and smiled in his sleep. The movement was brief and purposeful, a flurry of activity. Twig was still at the helm, holding a straight course, while all around him the crew busied themselves with the nets as they flew towards an incoming flock of migrating snowbirds. It would be baked snowbird for supper. The ropes clacked and jingled against the mast. "Hard to starboard," came a voice. Twig sighed and rolled over onto his side. The second stillness was orange, a desert of flickering emptiness. There were no more voices, not even his own. His back was cold, his face was hot. His eyes snapped open. At first what he saw made no sense. A fire in front of him, charred bones and patches of grease in the dust. The dense canopy above with stripes of bright early morning sunlight lacing the air. Here's a picture. Twig sat bolt upright. Suddenly, the events of the previous night came back to him. The storm, the sky ship, stumbling across the flight rock, eating with the sky pirates, finding his father. So where were they all now? They had gone without him. Twig howled with pain and loss and desolation. Tears streamed down his face, turning the stripy sunlight to star-shaped rainbows. They had left him behind. His choking sobs filled the air. "Why, my father, why?" he cried out. "Why have you abandoned me again?" His words faded away, and with them his hopes of ever finding his way beyond the deep woods. He hung his head. The forest seemed quieter than usual. No coughing fromps, no squealing quarms, no screeching razor flits. Not only had the sky pirates gone, but it was as if they had taken all the woodland creatures with them. Yet the air was not completely silent. There was a low roaring sound, a hissing sound, a crackling sound, which even as Twig sat there with his head in his hands, grew in volume. The heat at his back became more intense. The hamel horn-skin waistcoat began to prickle ominously. Twig spun around. "Aye!" he screamed. It wasn't sunlight he had seen, it was fire. The deep woods were ablaze. A piece of burning oak wood, which had floated away from the sky pirate's slapdash fire, had become lodged in the branches of a lullaby tree. The lullaby had smoldered and smoked. Hours later, it burst into flames. Fanned on by the stiff breeze, the fire had rapidly spread. Now from the forest floor to the tips of the canopy leaves, a solid wall of red and orange flames was advancing across the forest. The heat was overwhelming. Twig swooned as he stumbled to his feet. A blazing branch crashed down beside him, the sparks exploding like droplets of gold. Twig took to his heels and ran. And he ran with the wind at his side, trying desperately to reach the end of the fiery wall before the flames consumed him. He ran as he had never run before, yet not fast enough. At both ends, the wall of fire was curling around. Soon he would be surrounded. The burning air scorched the fur on his jacket, sweat poured over his face and streamed down his back. His head throbbed with the relentless blast of molten air. The curving ends of the wall closed in further. "Faster," Twig said, urging himself on. "Faster!" There he is, running. There's fire all around him. He sped past a halitoad whose short, stubby front legs had slowed its escape fatally. A hoverworm, bewildered by the heat and smoke, flew around and around in circles before disappearing into the flames with an explosion of fetid steam. To his right, Twig caught sight of a wreathing green of a terry vine trying in vain to dodge the advancing fire. The blood oak it was attached to screamed and squalled as the first of the orange tongues lapped at the base of its trunk. On and on Twig ran. The two ends of the wall of fire had almost come together now. He was all but encircled. His only hope of escape lay in the narrow gap remaining between the towering flames. Like two curtains hooked to the sky, they were being drawn across. Twig made a dash for the opening. His lungs burned with heat and smoke. His head swam. As if in a dream, he watched the shimmering curtains of fire close. Twig stopped and looked about him. He was slap bang in the middle of the burning circle. He was done for. All around him, bushes and branches were smoking. Flames broke out, guttered, and burst into life once again. Giant wood succulents hissed and steamed as the water within their fat, angular limbs began to boil. Fatter and fatter they grew until bang, 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 bang! They exploded like corks from bottles of wood fizz. Their seeds shot through the air in a jet of frothing liquid. The water doused the flames, but only for a second. Twig backed away from the advancing fire. He looked over his shoulder. It was getting closer there too. To his left, to his right. The fire was closing in. Twig looked up into the sky. "Oh, Glumgloser," he whispered. "Help!" All at once, a tremendous noise cut through the roar of fire. Twig spun around. The purple flames of a burning luffwood tree were dancing not 20 yards away. The creaking, cracking noise came again. Twig saw the whole tree tremble. It was about to fall on top of him. He glanced this way, that way. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and nothing to protect himself with. Again the noise echoed around about him, rasping, jarring, like the rotten tooth Twig had pulled from the Banderbear's swollen jaw. "No!" Twig screamed as the tree wobbled and shook. For a second it remained suspended in the air. Twig fell to the ground and rolled into a ball. A blast of blistering air battered his body. He clamped his eyes shut and waited, petrified, for the tree to come crashing down on him. Nothing happened. He waited some more. Still nothing happened. But how? Why? Twig lifted his head, opened his eyes, and gasped in amazement. The massive luffwood tree, now a blazing purple inferno, was hovering above the ground. The luffwood, so buoyant when alight, had dragged the very roots from the earth and was rising slowly up toward the sky. On either side were two more luffwoods whose anchoring roots were even now being torn out of the ground. The melancholy voice of the lullaby filled the air as it too rose up above the blazing forest. The sky itself seemed to be on fire. There it is, floating off. Okay. Where the burning trees had been, now there was darkness. It looked like a gappy smile. Twig seized his chance and made a headlong dash toward the sudden opening. He had to get there before it closed again. Nearly, he panted. The fire was on both sides of him. He ducked his head and lifted the collar of his jacket against the simmering heat as he ran the gauntlet of flames. Just a few steps more, just a little bit further. He raised his arm to shield his eyes and sprinted through the enclosing flames. His throat stung, his skin prickled, his nostrils caught the whiff of his own scorched hair. All at once the heat grew less intense. Twig was outside the circle of fire. He ran on a little more. The wind had dropped. The smoke had thickened. He stopped and turned and watched for a moment as the great balls of purple and turquoise rose, ablaze and airborne, majestically into the darkening sky. He'd done it. He'd escaped the forest fire. Yet there was no time for congratulating himself, not yet at least. The coils of smoke were winding themselves around him, filling his eyes and mouth, blinding him, choking him. On and on Twig stumbled, breathing through his scarf, which he held tightly against his face. Further and further, his head throbbed, his lungs ached, his eyes smarted and streamed. "I can't go on," Twig sputtered. "I must go on." He kept walking till the roaring of the forest fire was just a memory, till the smoke was replaced with cold gray mist, which, though as blindingly thick as the smoke, was wonderfully refreshing. He kept on to the very edge of the deep woods, and still he did not stop. The mist thickened and thinned. There were no more trees, no bushes, no shrubs, no plants, nor flowers. Beneath Twig's feet the ground became hard, as the spongy earth of the deep woods gave way to a pavement of pitted rock, slippery from the thick, greasy mist. He picked his way carefully over the treacherous slabs. One slip, and his foot would become wedged in the deep fissures between. The mist thinned and thickened, as it always did, for these were the edgelands, that narrow stretch of barren rock which separated the deep woods from the edge itself. Beyond lay the unknown, the uncharted, the unexplored, a place of seething craters and swirling fogs, a place into which even the sky pirates never ventured intentionally. So there's where he's walking. Okay. The gathering breeze blew in from over the edge. It brought with it a whiff of sulfur as broad tongues of fog lulled over the top of the cliff and lapped at the rock. The air was filled with the moans and groans of an eternity of mournful lost souls. Or was it only the rising wind softly howling? Twig trembled. Was this the place the catabird had meant when he told him his destiny lay beyond the deep woods? He wiped the beads of water away from his face and leaped over a wide crack in the rock. As he landed, his ankle buckled under him. He yelped and collapsed and rubbed at the throbbing joint tenderly. Gradually, the pain grew less acute. He hobbled to his feet and tentatively placed his weight down. "I think it's all right," he muttered with relief. Out of the sulphurous mist came a reply. "I'm glad to hear it, Master Twig," he said. Twig gasped. This was definitely not the wind playing tricks. It was a voice, a real voice. More than that, it was a familiar voice. "You have traveled far since you strayed from the wood troll path," it continued, lilting slightly mockingly. "So very, very far, and I have tracked you every step of the way." Who are you?" stammered Twig, peering into the gray swirling mist. "Why can't I see you?" "Oh, but you have seen me often enough, Master Twig," the wheedling voice continued, "in the sleepy morning of the slaughterer's camp, in the sticky corridors of the guile goblin colony, in the underground cavern of the termagant trogs. I was there. I was always with you." Twig went weak in the knees. He was confused, frightened. He racked his brains, trying to make sense of the words he was hearing. He had heard the soft, insistent voice before, that much was certain, and yet... "Can you really have forgotten, Master Twig?" came the voice again, and the air hissed with a nasal snigger. Twig fell to his knees. The rock was cold and clammy to the touch. The mist grew thicker than ever. Twig could barely see his hand in front of his face. "What do you want of me?" There he is right there. "Want of you? Want of you?" The voice broke into raucous laughter. "It's what you want of me, Master Twig. After all, you did summon me." I summoned you?" said Twig, the faltering words weak and muffled in the dense fog. "But how? When?" Come, the voice complained. "Don't act the innocent little wood troll with me. Oh, Gloamglozer, it said in a desperate voice that Twig recognized as his own. Please, 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 let me find the path again. Do you deny you called me? Twig trembled with horror as he realized what he'd done. But I didn't know, he protested. I didn't mean. You called me, and I came, said the Gloamglozer, and there was a menacing edge to his voice now. I followed you. I looked after you. More than once I led you out of the perilous situations you had gotten yourself into. There was a pause. Did you not think that I was listening, Master Twig? It went on more gently now. I'm always listening for the stragglers, the loners, the ones who don't fit in. I help, I guide, and eventually... Eventually? Twig murmured. They come to me, the voice announced, as you have come to me, Master Twig. The mist thinned once more. It floated in the air like flimsy twists of cobweb. Twig discovered that he was kneeling next to the edge of a cliff. Inches away from him, the ground fell away into pitch blackness. Behind him were the rolls of pungent cloud, and in front, Twig cried out in fear and alarm, in front, hovering over the void, was the hideous grinning face of the Gloamglozer itself. Calloused and warty, with thick tussocks of hair sprouting out of its long, snarling face, it leered at Twig and licked its lips. Yikes! Oh my gosh, scary time. Uh-oh. Come to me, it coaxed. You called me and here I am. Take that final step, why don't you? It held out its hand toward him. You belong to me. Twig stared back, unable to tear his gaze away from the creature's monstrous face. Two horns curled to thin, sharp points. Two yellow eyes fixed him in a hypnotic stare. The mist grew still thinner. Around the Gloamglozer's shoulder was a greasy gray cloak, which fell away into nothingness. Oh my gosh. Here's a picture of his face. Ah! Creepy! One small step, it said softly and beckoningly. Take my hand. Twig stared down at the bony talon fingers. That's all it takes for someone like you, Master Twig, to join me. The voice continued seductively, and the yellow eyes grew wide. For you are special. Special? Twig whispered. Special, the Gloamglozer repeated. I knew that from the moment I first heard your call. You had an overwhelming longing and emptiness inside which you yearn to fill. And I can help you. I can teach you. That's what you really want, isn't it, Master Twig? You want to know, to understand. That's why you left the path. Yes, said Twig dreamily. That's why I left the path. The Deepwoods aren't for you, the Gloamglozer went on, flattering, insistent. Not for you, the huddled together for safety, the hiding in corners, the fear of everyone and everything outside, because you are like me. You're an adventurer, a traveler, a seeker, a listener. Its voice became hushed and intimate. You too could be a Gloamglozer, Master Twig. I can instruct you. Take my hand and you'll see. Twig moved a step closer. His ankle jarred. The Gloamglozer, still hovering in midair just beyond the edge, trembled. Its monstrous face contorted with pain. Tears welled in the corners of its yellow eyes. Oh, what a time you've had of it, it sighed. Constantly on the lookout, never out of danger, always frightened. But the tables can be turned, Master Twig, if you just take my hand. Twig shuffled awkwardly from one foot to the other. There was a rattle and a clatter as a flurry of dislodged rocks bounced down into the chasm. And looked like you. The Gloamglozer threw back its head and roared with mirthless laughter. But have you forgotten, my vain little one, it said. You can look how you will. A mighty warrior, a handsome prince, anything. Imagine it, Master Twig. it went on enticingly. You could become a goblin or a troll. And as it spoke, Twig found himself face to face with a succession of characters he recognized only too well. There was the Guile Goblin who had led him from the colony, the Flathead who had helped him out of the mire, the Trog who had tripped Mag and pointed the way to the air shaft. Or how about this one? The Glomglozer purred. Twig stared back at the red-faced individual with fiery hair. Didn't I hear you thinking how nice it would be to stay with the Slaughterers? It wheedled. Or perhaps you'd prefer a Bandabear, it said, shifting its shape again. Big, powerful. No one messes with a Bandabear, it sniggered unpleasantly, except wigwigs, of course. So look at all the things it had been. And kind of helped him, but kind of not. Twig shuddered. The hovering creature knew everything. Absolutely everything. I've got it, the Glomglozer cried, turning itself into a squat brown creature with knotted hair and a button nose. A wood troll. You could go home. You could fit in. Isn't that what you've always wanted? So there's the Bandabear and the wood troll. Twig nodded his head mechanically. You can be anyone, Master Twig, the Glomglozer said, resuming its own form. Anyone at all. You can go anywhere, do anything. Simply take hold of my hand, and all this shall be yours. Twig swallowed. His heart beat furiously. If the Glomglozer was right, he would never have to be an outsider again. And just think of the things you'll see, the Glomglozer purred enticingly. Think of the places you could go, shifting your shape, appearing as others want to see you, always safe, listening in corners, always one step ahead. Think of the power at your command. Twig stared at the outstretched hand. He was standing at the very edge of the cliff. His arm moved slowly forward, brushing against the spiky hamel-horn skin waistcoat. Go on, said the Glomglozer, its voice like oil and honey. Take that step forward. Reach out and take my hand. You know you want it. Yet Twig still held back. It wasn't as if all his encounters in the Deepwoods had been bad. The Bandabear had saved his life. So had the Slaughterers. It was they, after all, who had given him the jacket that had caught in the Blood Oak's gorge, which now bristled so sharply. He thought of his village, of Spelda, his own dearest mother mine, who had loved him like her own since the day he was born. Tears welled in his eyes. If he accepted the Glomglozer's tantalizing offer, he would not really turn into them, no matter what I look like, he thought. Instead, he would become what they all feared most, a Glomglozer. No, it was impossible. He would never again be able to return. Never. He would have to remain apart, aloof, alone. It is fear which makes us reluctant to be on our own, the Glomglozer said, reading his thoughts. Join me, and you need never be frightened again. Take my hand, and you will understand. Trust me, Master Twig. Twig hesitated. Could this be true? Could this truly be the terrible monster that all the forest dwellers feared? Have I let you down so far? The Glomglozer asked quietly. Twig shook his head dreamily. Besides, it added, almost as an afterthought, I thought you wanted to see what lay beyond the Deepwoods. Beyond the Deepwoods. The three words rang around inside Twig's head. Beyond the Deepwoods. Twig held out his hand. He stepped over the edge. With a screech of terrible laughter, the Glomglozer grabbed Twig's wrist, its talons biting into its flesh. They all fall for it, the Glomglozer cried triumphantly. All the poor little goblins and trolls, waifs and strays, they all think they're special. They all listen to me. They all follow my voice. It's pathetic. Oh my gosh. But you said I was special, Twig cried as he dangled from the Glumglozer's bony grasp over the yawning space below. Did I really? The Glumglozer sneered. You little fool! Did you honestly think you could ever be like me? You are as insignificant as all the rest, Master Twig, it said scornfully. You are nothing, nothing, it screeched. Do you hear me? But why are you doing this? Twig wailed desperately. Why? Because I am the Glumglozer, the beast cried out and cackled wickedly. A deceiver, a trickster, a cheat, and a fraud. All my fine words and fancy promises count for nothing. I seek out all those who have strayed from the path. I lure them to the edge, and I dispose of them. The Glumglozer released its grip. Twig screamed with terror. He was falling. Down, down he went, over the edge and into the bottomless depths of darkness below. Dun, dun, dun. The next chapter is called Beyond the Deep Woods. Oh my gosh.